everybody, welcome back to Startup X. This is lecture 7, O.S.F.I, Operations, Sales, Focus, and Intensity. Now that you made a great product, you still got to turn your product into a great company, and you got to do it yourself. The notion that you can hire an experienced manager to come and run your company for you to fill your skill gaps is an absolute fantasy. So you got to just understand you're not going to be able to outsource for a very long time. Doing all this work is part of the deal. That's what you signed up for. And they may not have the same skill gaps you do, but instinctually they got a lot of decisions wrong because they don't have the same mind. The idea doesn't come from the same DNA of the founder that created the idea. Thus, that person should be running the company for the foreseeable future. Growth and momentum are keys to execution. Growth is rule number one. You always got to be growing. When you're growing in a startup, everybody's happy. They feel like their careers are advancing. They're working on a company that's going places. If you're not growing, everybody's mad, leaving the company and playing the blame game. So rule number 2 is never lose momentum. You get burned out, demoralized, everybody starts leaving, the company collapses. The way you keep momentum is by making it a top priority. You're the CEO, it's your vision. You pick the metric that you want to optimize in the company, and you build extreme transparency around this metric so everybody can focus on it, and you remind everybody of this all the time. Even if it means every single week, you got to remind people this is the metric that we're going. That way you'll never lose momentum because people are focused on what they're hitting. A lot of people hide these metrics and financial from their employees, which is weird because they expect them to hit targets they can't see. Keep a list of what's blocking growth and talk to your team about it, address them so you can remove them and clear the path for success. For anything you consider doing, you got to ask yourself, is this the best way to optimize growth for any activity? You got to focus on the metric that you're optimizing. If going to a conference doesn't have anything to do with this metric, then you shouldn't go to the conference unless going to the conference means more sales, like you're going to sell at the conference, and this matrix is sales or revenue, then you should go to the conference. But that's the way you should look at everything, because part of the momentum is constantly updating your team with new progress, things, new features, sales, new partners, new users. Growth, momentum are keys to execution. Execution is keys to operations. Sales. You got to make money or you're going to be out of business. So you got to start thinking about that right now. Even if you have bad unit economics, you got to have a justification for why the numbers are going to work out in the long run. Sales in itself has become a huge industry. They teach you how to sell. They sell you on selling. So there are all kinds of books and seminars and audiobooks and conferences and tactics and strategies on how to sell, the sales 101 and all of these different things. But sales really comes down to 4 different things. 1, your product should sell itself. It does not mean you don't need salespeople. Sales should be used to navigate and close deals. It's not a substitute for a great product. And 4, really, it just comes down to distribution. Can you communicate your message to the right customer, to the right employee, to the right investor, to the right user? That's the bottom line. You have to prospect really, really well. You got to get people to pay more than it costs you to deliver the goods or service. If it's a free product, it's an ad-supported business, it's really hard to buy users. You can't afford sales or marketing. You got to make such a great product that people share it with their friends. If you have a product that has $500 or less in lifetime value, that's net to you, then you still can't afford sales, but you can afford, you can experiment with SEO or search engine marketing or ads. If you have a product that has more than $500 lifetime value. By the way, if you have a product that has less than $500 lifetime value and you're paying for ads or whatever, you better make sure you get your customer acquisition costs in 3 months or less. If your product is giving you more, netting you more than $500 lifetime value, then you can afford direct sales, and you should actually experiment with it yourself. As you see, it really helps to have at least one founder that's really good at sales. You got to raise money or you got to sell something to stay in business, because nobody knows the product better than the founder. And if you understand and you can confidently talk about your products, it makes you an even stronger salesperson. When do you decide to pivot from your idea? When do you realize that it's just a bad idea? 3 things to look at: bad growth, bad retention, bad economics. And you don't go like a long distance in a startup and then realize you're going to pivot. It's better to pivot earlier. If you get bad growth in 2 to 3 weeks in a row, something's wrong. You better learn how to pivot. If people are leaving the platform, users don't want to be part of it, you better learn how to pivot. If you have bad economics, it's just you're buying users, you lose $1,000 for each deal that you bring on board, like Carvana, then you should pivot. Sales and marketing are in bad words. They're not going to save you if you have a crappy product, but they can both accelerate growth substantially. You need extreme levels of focus and intensity. You got to ask yourself, what am I spending my time and money on? And do only a couple things. Delegate the rest. Everything else can wait. Advisors, investors, anything that's not related to those 2 critical tasks that's going to give you growth and momentum needs to be delegated. Or everything is important, but certain things are more important. You need to prioritization is highly critical and imperative, because you gotta spend your time on the right things. Nobody cares if you're working on the wrong things or how much effort. Again, input doesn't matter. We only care about output. That's how the world judges you. That's how, specifically in the business world, that's how things work. It's only about output. So really focus on minimum input on a couple different things to get you the maximum amount of output. You want to try to find 90% result with 10% of the effort. That's kind of the ratio you're looking at. That's why it's important to try a lot of different things to see what works. Then drill that down. Typically, one source you need to juice one source that gives you the most amount of outcome. So it's the Pareto principle that also works in startups. Look for singularity and juice the source that gives you the most. There's typically one distribution channel, one investor, one sales channel, one customer. You need focus and intensity in order to get through the startup process all the time. So you work hard, you work smart, and you work fast. You don't work one or the other. You work all 3 at the same time. And while you do that and you go through the startup process, your mind starts playing some tricks on you, or there are some common traps that founders find themselves falling into. One is, we call it house of cards syndrome, because the company is growing like crazy, but everything is incredibly inefficient or seems broken, and everybody feels like everything is going to come unraveled at any second. That rarely ever happens. That's actually good news. If you're growing like crazy and nothing is optimized, all you have to do is fix to get even more growth. A lot of companies are actually undervalued when they're growing and the company isn't even at its optimization level or capacity of what they could do. So those are actually great investments. Another common trap is Godzilla syndrome, thinking you're going to be as big as Google or Apple, or what are you going to do when you get there, or thinking too far into the future, because that's really not what you should be worried about. Just worry about 10 times the size that you are, at max 10 times the size that you are right now, and just the next step of what you have to do through the startup process. It's the natural selection model. So kind of be careful with overthinking or over planning too far into the future, or trying to optimize for that. That's a very, very common trap. Instead, really focus on great customer service, because early customer service makes for passionate early users, and they will be the lifeblood of your company moving forward. Their DNA will be built into the product. As we talked in the earlier chapters, you got to make products users love. If you already have your users, you got to start getting feedback from them and building the product so it's exactly what they wanted. So do your customer service, knock out the um, little bugs here and there, and make sure the product is so superb that it sells itself, and you're good. Another big trap is the big press launch syndrome, thinking that you're going to have this big press launch and your company is going to just blow up, or you're going to have this big partnership in place or this big sponsorship deal, and that's going to be the key to your company's success or massive growth. Those things never happen. Instead, focus on making products users love, recruiting a lot of users manually at first, testing a lot of growth strategies, ads, whatever you need to do, um, and then doing more of what works, and then asking your customers where you can find more people like them. Those manual things are really what's going to work in the long run. And if you're losing momentum, the last thing you want to do is give a company speech or whatever to try to pump people up. Instead, get on the phones and get some sales to encourage everybody that, hey, the product fits. There's a market. Everything is moving forward. We're growing. There's momentum. Stay with the company. That's it for lecture 7, everybody. See you next week for lecture 8, CFO.